So my name is Maxwell. I work for a communications agency called Imagination. And I want to talk for about 15 minutes on communication, which is why I've started with this. Some of you may remember the Babel fish, Douglas Adams' creation from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Babel fish is a little organism which you pop into your ear, and it magically allows you to communicate with any other sentient being in the universe. It is a kind of, in effect, a kind of lingua franca. Lingua franca. Lingua franca is a communication, is a language which is designed to allow people who don't share a native tongue to communicate with each other, to cooperate and collaborate. And you can see the obvious analogies with some of the tools that our hosts here have created. I don't want to labor that because I think it'll be quite obvious. Latin is the lingua franca of the Catholic Church. It allows people to, as I say, collaborate, but it really is the basis of any successful society, having a language which you can share. So I want to talk about communication. I don't really want to talk about communication between people. I want to talk about communication between computers and humans. So between us and between these things which we've designed, ironically, to help us communicate with each other better. And this is a perfect example of the problem that we face. The QR code, which to a computer is immediately legible and it's obvious and it contains huge amounts of data. But to a human, it's just a bunch of squares. Whereas a face, to us, contains layers and layers of meaning, cultural meaning and aesthetic meaning and history and memories. But to a computer, even if it recognizes it as a face, it's just a face. It cannot read it. Now, we're fascinated by faces because they tell stories, because we find them beautiful, because they don't really change much. They have a basic arrangement of features, which means that you can use them as a framework to examine all kinds of other ideas of in this case, gesture and perception, psychology. They haven't changed much over time either, so they give us a little wormhole into the past, and they transmit in a beautifully refined and elegant way ideas of beauty and elegance and aesthetics and how those things haven't changed. And they even are able to stand for ideas which are far bigger, ideas of political and social change and ethics. They are the harbinger of identity. It's where your identity is stored. It's how you're recognized. And commercially, any newspaper editor will tell you that if you stick a face on the front of a newspaper, you will sell twice as many copies as you would if you stick an object or a landscape or something. And actually, I think this is quite interesting because the story here is being told through our ability to read the difference between these two faces, the young man in his prime and the older man in decline. And there's a pathos which we can immediately decode. It's a skill which is quite extraordinary in its sophistication. Our ability to interrogate a database of meaning and profiles which we've built up all our lives. And when you start to add the ability of computers to start to analyze much larger data sets and construct faces, in this case, a kind of anthropological study, it starts to add a whole new level to it. And I find this fascinating. Because obviously these are constructed artificial faces, but as you look at them, they have real identity, or we start to impose identity on them, as well as starting to identify, actually, yes, that is a classic English look. That is a classic Peruvian face. It's something quite fascinating. Maybe I just fancy them all. It's possible. Obviously, this is a skill that we learn from day one, really. Somebody told me yesterday, and I think it's probably true, that your eyes, when you're born, are the same size. Your eyes are born fully formed. They never grow. So it's obvious that this is a key survival tool that we are equipped with. And the ability, the ability to, I'm going to knock that over your laptop. The ability to read a face, to recognize the people who are most important to us, to create that empathetic relationship is a key survival skill. These are the people who are going to feed you and look after you when you're most defenseless. This is the emotional relationship you're going to set up, which is going to make, again, not just that relationship, but the whole of human society binds it together. It's really important. And that's why images like this are so disturbing, because literally they don't, well, figuratively, they don't compute. And at the same time, they're fascinating, because there's a dissonance there which we immediately try and decode, and we try and figure out why it doesn't work and what it is. We're fascinated by faces. And again, you know, as in the modern age, as we have increasing tools and computer technology, we're able to study the physiology of why this happens, how we do this, how we have this skill, how it works. And I find it, particularly my background as a digital designer, that is the equivalent of the way that we optimize an interface design. We'll use eye tracking technologies to watch how people see and navigate through and interrogate an interface, decode it and navigate through it. We do exactly the same thing when we look at a face. And the amount of information we're able to grasp from that face is really almost infinite. Computers, again, and the computers, the merging of computers and humans and the perceptions tools that we use. There are a whole myriad now of different services. It's a bit like somebody once said about the iPad, incorrectly I think, that it was a solution in search of a problem. We've got this technology, we're trying to figure out what to do with it. So this is a company called Face++. You can do this off their website. It will give you an instant analysis of your face. I think it's interesting that obviously it gives you the biometrics, but the other things they seem to be interested in are your age, your degree of whiteness, which is kind of sinister. Although, gratifyingly, they've got me at 51%, which, considering I'm probably the whitest man on earth, is pretty... and even more gratifyingly, 99.98% male, despite my pretty girly hair that I've got in that picture. So we've got these tools, and that's my question to you today. What are we going to do with them? So, for example, one thing I've been playing around with, and I'll demonstrate it later if anybody's interested, is taking one of these open source APIs which can measure the face, taking those metrics, taking the angle and the distance between all the primary markers on the face, transcribing those into musical tones, because music is essentially mathematical, and using it to sing your face back to you. We're fascinated by faces, by what they look like, but nobody's ever thought, what do they sound like? So that's a happy use of it. The flip side is things like this. This is something that Facebook, and guys, the clue is in the name here, Facebook, which has the largest photo collection in the world, and principally of people's faces, and I suspect that there's very few people in this room today who don't have a picture of themselves on Facebook, which means that we're now very close to having the largest facial audit of the human population that we've ever seen. I've developed this thing called, rather suggestively, I think, called deep face, which is, claims to have almost human levels, 97.4% ability to recognize a face. This is Sylvester Stallone in this case. And so that opens the doors to what is, potentially this nightmarish dystopian world where there is nowhere to hide, where you walk down Shoreditch High Street and any camera that's there is tracking you, they know who you are, where you've been, what your credit record is, what your criminal record is, what your sexual, everything about you. There's nowhere to hide. So this privacy issue becomes really quite problematic. And the takeout thought that I'm going to give you at the end, and I'll start now, is that we as creators and we as the inheritors of these tools, thank you Adobe, thank you everyone else, what are we going to do with them? Do we use them like superpowers? Do we use them for good or for evil? Deepface actually is currently suspended theory because of a legal challenge in the US. But meantime, the rebellion is starting. This is a great artist called Leo Salvaggio. He's in Chicago, I think. I think I'll let him speak for himself. This is a short clip from his website.
I'm a person from surveillance. What if I just showed the cameras a different, alternative identity? Let the camera tag a face, so long as it's not the public's face. In other words, I wanted to make a kind of Guy Fawkes mask that could pass for an actual person. Enter Your Me surveillance devices. Using my own face as a decoy, these products serve to protect the public from surveillance by having cameras track me instead of you. In other words, when you're out in the world, your actions on camera will be attributed as my own.
I am Spartacus. I think that's fantastic. It's You Are Me. You can buy these for $200, which he sells at cost price, apparently. You can be Leo Salvaggio if you want to. You can disappear. So other people are doing this. This is Isao Ishitsun's privacy. I think of this as the anti-Google Glass, because what he's trying to do is prevent perception happening, prevent him from being happen. However, there's a counter-argument. The counter-argument, obviously, is that face recognition is something that we have always done, something that we depend on. When I walk into my corner shop, they know it's me. Straight away, they know it's me. They know I owe them a $5. They know they've got the magazine that I prepared for them. They know my kids. They can, in a second, instantaneously, they can access a whole profile, which is continually evolving, which is what allows commerce to happen. It's what allows business to happen. It's what allows human relationships to happen. Computers allow us to do that better. What could possibly be wrong with that? And we're working on that at Imagination with the spirit of optimism and taking that moral challenge by the horns and thinking, okay, how can we use this stuff to make the world a better place? How can we make experiences better? So, for example, with luxury brands, we work with Jaguar and Land Rover and Rolls-Royce and Aston Martin. One of their prime concerns is how do we communicate with our most important customers on a one-to-one basis? We can't treat people as punters. We have to treat them as individuals. And we have to do that on an international basis. How can we, and typically at the moment, it comes down to the members of staff to recognize those customers, but there's got to be a better way of doing it with some kind of informed consent, obviously. We are looking at how can we make the events and the exhibitions and the experiences we create better, more fun. How do we do that? You can do it on an ad hoc basis by going around and asking people, or you can actually track them. If they're smiling, if they spend longer, it's working. If they're not smiling and they don't spend any time on it, you've got to improve it. You're not getting your message across. You're not building an effective experience. And all this is adding up to our objective at the moment, which I think is quite ambitious, but it's quite exciting, which is to create what we call emotionally intelligent spaces. Spaces which can react in real time at the speed of emotional intelligence to the people who are using them, to their occupants. And that might be as little as changing color, or it might be any number of things. Using that technology to actually improve people's lives rather than to spy upon them. It's a principle of optimism, I'd suggest. It's a belief that we have as a company and also I have as an individual that optimism is essential. Companies that invest in the future and innovate and motivate their staff tend to succeed better than those that cling to the past and are risk-averse. And to put that in a different way, that computer might recognize, we could say that if it's true that you're sad, stop being sad and be awesome. I actually have really rattled through this, so I've got time to show you one more thing, which is another example of actually putting my work where my mouth is. Music clearly is a lingua franca that both computers and humans understand. Music is based on mathematical principles. Computers love maths, and the maths it creates, humans love the music it creates. So this is a little project I did last year. Again, just a little prototype experiment. And it allows me to end on music as well, which I think is always good show business. So thank you very much indeed. The chests of generals sport a plumage that would rival anything in the animal kingdom. It's a codified abstract design language that speaks to the personal and political and military feats that have shaped that individual's life. The ribbon pictures interpret the decorations of 5 prominent members of the armed forces. From the sea, from the UN Peacekeeping Force, from the US Marine Corps, US Strategic Bomber Command, and General Petraeus of the US Army. Ribbons become music by assigning a musical note to each colour, with the width of that colour dictating the length of that note. The soprano, Susan Parks, then sings the scores and tries to make sense of something which is inherently, musically illogical. Finally, the developer, Lloyd Harrison, unifies the results into a smartphone app, which allows the pictures to sing for themselves. Fabulous. Thank you very much.
I'm joined in the tube now by Matthew Maxwell, Digital Creative Director at Imagination. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us.
That's my pleasure.
I really enjoyed your presentation. You mentioned in your presentation some software that will turn faces into sounds, right?
That's right.
I'd kind of love to hear what my face sounds like.
Shall we try it?
Yes, please.
Okay. So what you need to do, what I need to do is turn the iPad on. What you need to do is hold it up like a mirror, like a look into the looking glass.
Okay.
And when the app finds your face and recognises it as a face, you hit the play button.
Okay, let's try and keep nice and still.
And now what it's going to do is it's going to measure the biometric markers on your face. It's going to turn those
there it
into
goes.
musical form.
It's going. Hopefully you can hear this, guys. This is what I sound like. Fantastic, I love it.
Sounds beautiful.
I sound brilliant, don't I? Thank you very much indeed for that. So tell me a bit more about the software.
Well, the motivation for this was really the fascination that we have with faces, and the idea that artists have always been inspired by faces, and the face is the location of the identity of an individual.
Yeah.
But nobody's ever really thought about what the sound of that individual would be. So if your face had a unique sound, what would it be?
Yeah.
So the app is called. It's a prototype. It's a little experiment I'm playing with. It's called Solo because it is specifically about your face, and it's a unique sound which only your face can produce.
Yes, it certainly is a unique sound. I was delighted to hear it. Thank you. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is the Creative Cloud and the 2014 release and the 4 pillars that are the main focus of this release, and they are Get Mobile, Always Connected, Work Faster, and Cutting Edge. Now, how important are all of these things to your agency and how you work?
Imagination are a global agency, and our clients are global as well. So being able to collaborate and to connect all the very diverse skills and technologies that we use is essential. It allows us to work faster. It allows us to stay at the cutting edge because that's where they expect us to be.
There have also been some huge industry shifts recently with mobile, cloud and social, meaning that we consume and also create content differently. How has this impacted your business?
It's really relevant in territories like China and the developing world, where in many cases they've just bypassed the internet altogether and gone straight to mobile.
Right.
So we do a lot of work with Jaguar and Land Rover in China, and increasingly they're asking us to communicate across mobile, and that means we have to use that technology, but also we have to adopt that methodology and understand how customers are using it, often in very, very diverse cultural setups.
Absolutely, all really important things that we're trying to keep pace with the Creative Cloud as well. So let me just find out a little bit more now about how you entered the industry. What's the secrets to your success?
I entered the industry when I got my girlfriend pregnant, actually, and I had to get a job.
Yeah.
Before that, I was an artist. Before that, I was working in the film business and just sort of bumming around. I came back to London in 1997, just as the internet was kicking off, and it seemed like the most interesting thing happening. It turned out to be true.
Good call.
Because it hasn't stopped. In
Yes.
fact, it's just getting bigger.
Yeah.
So luck.
Yeah. And what advice would you have to young people now who are kind of starting out in their careers?
Yeah, I think if you're intending or you have ambition to be a creator, to be a maker, you need to start making things, making anything.
Yeah.
Making anything that you feel passionate about, not worrying too much about whether it's something that people are asking for, whether you can sell it, whether anybody cares. Just exercise those muscles of creativity.
Yeah, that's interesting actually. Our photography luminary had very similar things to say.
Yeah.
And so if somebody's coming to Imagination as a potential employer, what sort of things are you looking for?
We look for that. We look for an appetite to make things.
Yeah.
You know, we're looking for people who are artisans, who actually want to create and have a passion for it.
Yeah.
We're looking for people who have the ability to, and I hate the expression of think outside the box, but it really is true, because it's amazing how fast the train tracks get laid down, and we expect that we're meant to just carry on down them.
Yeah.
But I think principally what we look for is a quality of emotional intelligence, because ultimately we have clients, and clients have stresses and expectations
That
of their
ability to communicate and understand all of those issues is really important, right?
Often to listen is more important than to speak. And this is something that I was speaking about earlier, how expression precedes speech. We learn how to read a face before we learn how to speak a language.
Absolutely.
And that's a skill which can carry you all the way through your career.
Absolutely. Some fantastic tips and insights there for all of you guys starting out in the industry. Matthew, thank you so much for your time and for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you for having me.